In a panel discussion hosted by the National Constitution Center, 3 originalist scholars were invited to discuss originalism and its history. At the end of the video, the host, Jeffrey Rosen, president and CEO of the National Constitution Center, asked each participant to give their best defense of originalism. Each provided a different argument, and I intend on creating a short video discussing each of those arguments. Here, I will discuss the defense provided by J. Joel Alicea of the Catholic University. To introduce the topic, originalism is the thesis that judges should interpret the Constitution of the United States by attempting to discover the original public meaning of its words and phrases. To determine if a punishment is cruel and unusual, we have to ask what people living in 1790 would have thought was cruel and unusual, and so forth. So this is what Alicea answered when asked what he considered to be the best defense of that thesis. Quote, "The best justification for originalism is that if judges do not adhere to the meaning of a constitutional provision as it was understood at the time that it was ratified, they undermine the authority of the people to govern themselves. And in doing so, they do great harm to the common good, because the common good requires that somebody be the authoritative lawmaker within a society. And for us, it is we the people, in setting the higher law of the Constitution to govern our government. And to the extent that you undermine the people's ability to enact constitutional provisions that have real force moving forward, you do great harm to that society. So ultimately, it's a justification that is rooted in an understanding of popular sovereignty." End quote. I see a couple of ways of interpreting this argument. In one interpretation, Alicea is arguing that we, the people, have decided to interpret the Constitution according to the principles of originalism. Therefore, it would undermine our sovereignty to interpret the Constitution using some other system that the people don't accept. The problem with this argument is that it says that we should use originalism because we do use originalism. This isn't a valid inference. If it were, then one could have inferred in 1850 that we should have slavery because we do have slavery. Or in 1950, we should have segregation because we do have segregation. This just isn't a valid inference. A second possible interpretation takes the argument at face value. Not using originalism undermines popular sovereignty, and undermining popular sovereignty is contrary to the public good. Alicea stated explicitly that judges who do not use originalism, quote, undermine the authority of the people to govern themselves, unquote. And he said that to serve the public good, society needs an authoritative lawmaker, and for us it is we the people who are the authoritative lawmakers. However, I don't see how a failure to use originalism to interpret the Constitution undermines popular sovereignty. In fact, it seems that the opposite is true. Under originalism, judges don't appeal to the will of the people. Judges are appealing to the beliefs and values of people who have been dead for 200 years or so. It's the original authors of the Constitution who are the authoritative lawmakers, not we the people. If I were to provide you with a set of written instructions and told you to follow those instructions to the letter, with no discretion or any room for you to use your own judgment, I wouldn't be protecting you in the exercise of your own authority and autonomy. I'd be leaving you with no autonomy to exercise, other than the autonomy to do what you're told. Against these types of arguments, I tend to use an analogy to a hypothetical situation in which King Henry VIII, instead of naming an heir, left in his will a set of instructions for governing England in perpetuity. Henry VIII in this case was never going to allow anybody other than him to govern England ever again. Furthermore, in his will, he set up a system of judges with the power to interpret the rules, and those judges are instructed to apply the original public meaning of his words. Now, this clearly isn't a case of giving the people self-rule. It's only in the things not listed in Henry's instructions that people are free to govern their own lives, the things not covered in this Constitution. Whatever the people of England wanted to do, they would need to check to see if it violated Henry's instructions before they could do it. That's not self-rule. In fact, it's a worse form of despotism than that which existed when Henry VIII was alive. Well, Henry VIII was alive, people at least had a chance of going up to him and saying, these rules aren't working out very well over here, perhaps you can consider changing them. Now that Henry VIII is dead, you can't reason with him. You can't reason with a corpse. You can't tell a bunch of dead people, look, this isn't really working for us. How about you change the rule a little and expect an answer. At this point, the standard originalist response to this objection is to say that we should use the amendment process to change the rules. Now remember, Alicea's argument is that using originalism to interpret the Constitution protects self-rule. But does the amendment process allow for self-rule? Any well-funded minority can block any change to the Constitution. It takes a massive supermajority and a great deal of money and organization to make any kind of change. In fact, history suggests that, except for making procedural changes to elections or terms of office, substantive changes to the Constitution are nearly impossible. For all practical purposes, the amendment process for substantive change goes as follows. Step 1. Engage in a long and brutal civil war, killing and wounding a huge portion of the citizens, and laying waste to whole regions of the country until one side has been beaten into submission. Step 2. The winning side can now force through substantive changes. We were lucky last time that the better side won. The next time, things may turn out quite different. There may be good reasons to support originalism. I've only discussed one argument in its defense in this video. However, originalism does not protect popular sovereignty or self-rule. It involves a sacrifice of popular sovereignty. It's not the people who rule, it's a bunch of dead people who left behind a set of instructions and a demand that those instructions be followed to the letter, without exception. And that is neither self-rule nor popular sovereignty.